good evening, and welcome again to Andmar Development Chilliwack Chooses 2024. I'm your host, Louis De Jaeger, and I ran in the 2015 federal election as the Liberal candidate. Joining me on our panel tonight, on my left is DJ Pohl, the 2021 federal NDP candidate, and John Less, who is even further left, which I don't think anyone ever thought would be said about John. And he, of course, was a former MLA and mayor of Chilliwack when there was such a thing as BC Liberals. Let the fireworks begin. But seriously, we are very excited to bring you an evening of analysis and political punditry. Hey, it only comes once every 4 years or so, so buckle your seatbelts and enjoy the ride. I'd also like to introduce Dawn Lane, anchor of This Week in Chilliwack. Dawn will be providing updates throughout the evening, both from our two local ridings and from around the province. Thank you to our title sponsor, Andmar Development, responsible for that absolutely beautiful new development on Promontory Road, just north of G.W. Graham School. It's a mix of retail, entertainment, and urban living. Gives it a very Yaletown feel. Thanks also to VBN Broadcasting, who is powering Chill TV's live stream, and to the amazing Vineyard Media Center, where Chill TV Studios is located, right downtown Chilliwack. Okay, I think we're ready to go. DJ John, let's get started. Will Kevin Falcon's gamble pay off, or will tonight's atmospheric river rain down on his parade? John, what do you think?
Well, I'm not sure it was so much a gamble by Kevin Falcon. Mm-hmm. I don't think he had any options left. He was looking at a campaign about to start, and he had no money and no prospect of getting any money to wage a campaign. And let's face it, the party was falling apart around him. The wheels were coming off. So he really didn't have much of a choice. He left it a little late, in my view, which probably inhibited the Conservative Party from putting together a better campaign than they did. They're kind of, putting the plane together as they were flying kind of approach. Mm-hmm. And I think that showed once in a while throughout the campaign. So it'll be interesting to see tonight. They seem to be on a pretty good surge until about 10 days ago. Then they seem to kind of plateau. Question tonight is, whether they found another surge or not.
Right, and I guess whether was it enough time for the candidates to sort of get their heels ready to go, get on the doorsteps, and just get out there and make themselves known. DJ, what are your thoughts?
I really like how you introduced this topic and your choice of the word use gamble in terms of Kevin Falcon and his history of casinos in BC and money laundering and the state of where we are in terms of affordability, housing crisis, and all of these things. And I agree that the options for him were quite limited. And so at this point, that folding of the party to back John Rustad and a party who was a sitting MLA within the BC United or Liberal, axed party at this point, who was booted from that party for, believing climate change is a depopulation conspiracy or program type thing, and then backing that specific person and that party in a way where there aren't quality candidates who are going to represent our communities in a very productive way. And how is it that we're going to actually address the issues that have continued to cause crisis in our communities that certainly Kevin Falcon played a huge role in creating?
Yeah, and I think let's talk a little bit about posturing and where people shifted, because I know being Minister of Health for Métis Nation BC, we were starting to have some conversations like in March about the recriminalization of drugs, and we were thinking to ourselves at that time, things are kind of, moving a little bit here. We see the NDP maybe moving a little to the center, calming the waters on maybe some arguments that could have came up during an election. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, from the BC Conservative perspective, I thought that was an opportunity missed. For example, in last week's debate on Global, I don't believe that John Rustad once mentioned the fact that open drug use in hospitals was now a feature in British Columbia. And yet, that was most upsetting to so many people, and it was hardly touched on. So again, what I referred to earlier is they were putting the campaign together very quickly, and so people have seen, I think, over the last 7 years, a real deterioration in healthcare access for one, and these issues of drug decriminalization that even David Eby has had to backtrack on, calling it an experiment, didn't work, so now we'll undo it. These are pretty serious things.
Right.
And I think people had a right to be upset with that. But we're in a strange kind of election. We have this one party, on the one hand, that really wasn't ready to go and was kind of making it up as they're going along, and the other party that, to my mind, didn't really see a groundswell of enthusiasm either. So I think for a lot of people it was a bit of a difficult decision. And so we'll see how that plays out tonight. It could be close. I still think it could be close.
Yeah, and one other thing is we saw the NDP shift a little bit on the carbon tax. And we were starting to hear, oh, well, maybe that might be a thing of the past. So we saw that, movement maybe a little in the center, because we saw the BC Liberals, take that sort of right turn. DJ.
Well, we just hit a whole bunch of topics there. It's going to take kind of the whole night to unpack, I'm sure. In terms of decriminalization of drugs, healthcare, the carbon tax, and the climate crisis. These are massive issues that aren't necessarily worthy of a brief kind of commentary. But if we really want to do some analysis that I think is going to be beneficial for us on a local community perspective, looking forward, what are the solutions to these issues and the problems, and how do we address the underlying reasons that these things are occurring? So crime in our community, the opioid crisis and drug usage, are we addressing the underlying reasons that those problems are existing? And are the solutions being offered going to be short-sighted or long-term and provide the sustainable health of our communities? And climate change is certainly wrapped up in that, as well as healthcare. And certainly, plans to, remove funding for public healthcare and move to a privatization of healthcare is not in the best interest of folks working within the healthcare industry, but also folks accessing healthcare, very needed in our communities. And we are in healthcare crisis right now, and there's so much work to do. I think that, having this really interesting analysis of BC loves to do things in a very interesting way. I think we're one of the only provinces, historically, that have like a full, complete folding of a party with a massive kind of resurgence and realignment that occurs within one election cycle. It has happened in the past, but
numerous times,
and it's interesting that this is where we are at now. But again, is this serving the best interests of everyone in our communities, and how are we actually addressing the underlying issues and forming solutions that are going to work for everyone? Those are kind of like, we can dig into those specific topics if you want, and I'm sure that we will in general, but there's certainly lots to unpack, and having these parties, so basically the two-party race that we're in now. BC NDP know who they are, know what they stand for. There's a costed platform, and the BC Conservatives are newly formed, don't know who they are, are backed by the ex-Liberals or United Party in some sort of fashion, but those folks are then left potentially disenfranchised in terms of followers who don't, feel available to either camp. So it's a really interesting situation in terms of experience in governing and ability to address the solutions in a way that we need them for the health of our communities, and knowing who we are, who we're voting for, what they stand for, and what that means, and how we got to be where we are right now. That's what we're talking about today.
Just to underline what I was trying to say a minute ago, where voters are perhaps unsure in this election. I can remember in my time in politics, one of the key questions at election time always was the people's take on, is the government on the right track?
Yes.
Are we heading in the right direction? And I would argue if that question was being asked today in British Columbia after 7 years of the NDP, I doubt that more than 50% of the people would say we're on the right track. Probably more would say, no, there's something wrong. But here's where the BC Conservative Party comes in, just recently formed in some ways, putting together the campaign almost on the fly, with vastly less money to campaign than the BC NDP. Just their contribution from the public purse alone over the 4 years was a difference of about $8 million. So that matters. So those are factors as well. In terms of this campaign, which I guess we're talking about tonight, this campaign and how it will, turn into votes later this evening. So, that's why I say the voter this year goes to the ballot box in a slightly different frame of mind than perhaps the election previous, which was a really odd election because it was done right in the middle of COVID. And then there was a 2017 election that we all remember so well, which was a cliffhanger as well, which was at that point the BC Liberals election to lose, and they did. And so
I do want to ask you one thing though, do you think there's apprehension out there from those that were more in the middle with, say, more BC Liberals or BC United, and those candidates were already out there and people were already attached maybe to some of the policy and some of the candidates already? Is that automatically going to transfer over to a Conservative Party that maybe we didn't see all of their platforms, or things don't quite align up with BC United?
When it comes to voters, never assume too much. Don't take them for granted. So I would never assume that every BC United member or past voter would automatically transfer to the BC Conservatives. Nor would I automatically suggest that somebody who voted NDP in the past wouldn't vote Conservative now. That may well happen. The Conservative Party was out there right from the get-go saying, we're done with the carbon tax, we're getting rid of that. There's a lot of working people where that resonates. And so, in every election, every voter has their right and opportunity to make up their mind yet again, and it might be the same vote that they did last time, but it might be something else again. So we see, I think, some fluidity today in the political marketplace.
DJ, do you think some of those voters might have went with the devil you know?
Absolutely. Voters are always, free to make up their own mind and change their mind on their vote. The most important thing is engaging in that vote. The disenfranchisement I think voters are feeling right now, and disengagement from voting in general, stems from this concern that the system is not working, and potentially, are we necessarily, if we're on the right path and headed in the right direction but still falling short, do we trust that party to get us there, or are we choosing a party with a newly formed or unformed platform and experience to carve a new path when we're facing a number of crises? And I think acknowledging some of the past historical elections of how we came to be here, where we are right now, and then where we're going to go forward, and how we're going to improve life for everyone in the communities. And certainly, yes, working people are struggling right now. As a union member, workers are struggling. Affordability is real. Climate change is impacting our lives in many different shapes or forms. And there must be a commitment to get there and address these issues collectively and holistically in terms of that affordability and disproportionate impacts within the communities and how it's impacting people. So that is the question that we're going to have answered tonight by the voters in BC of what is the direction voters want this province to take in terms of solutions being offered to the problems that are you know, we've had a short reign of the BC NDP following quite a long reign of the previous BC Liberals that we're still recovering from, frankly. And again, it's not this like point fingers of like how, you know, whose fault is it that we got where we are. There's so many things that have happened.
And this is kind of historic because we've never had like two incumbent NDP candidates, right, in Chilliwack before. So what does that mean, John? Like, is it going to be harder, do you think, for maybe the right to get their votes together, to get out to the doors, to take those seats back again?
Well, it's a unique situation, I mean, that we haven't had before in Chilliwack. We have had one previous occasion where the Chilliwack-Kent riding, as it then was held by Gwen O'Mahony, and in the 2013 election that returned to the BC Liberal column. So you have to, you know, keep in mind what the scenario was the last time around when the two NDP members got elected in Chilliwack. In both ridings, I would argue, it was a complete case of split voting, because you had a strong independent candidate in Chilliwack-Kent, and you had Diane Jansen running for the Provincial Conservative Party. She picked up, I think, 21% of the vote, which I would argue in both of those cases allowed the NDP candidates to come up the middle. Kelli Paddon, for example, was elected last time with about 36% of the vote. That is a classic coming up the middle scenario. So that's kind of absent now. So it's more or less, more so in Chilliwack Cultus-Lake than it is in Chilliwack North.
And so we're going to have that tonight, though. We're going to have like two different chapters, two different stories to look at.
Somewhat.
One is where we do have, you know, 4 candidates going, and one that's just one-on-one.
Which is really unusual.
How is that going to play out, especially if one of those candidates now is an Indigenous candidate?
Yep. No, there's many factors that go into a voter's voting intentions. You know, I always used to say every voter that goes to the polls makes up their mind in their own way. And that's just, you know, the way it is. And so later on tonight, we'll see how that plays out in Chilliwack. I don't want to make any predictions yet how that will turn out in respect to the people who have yet to vote. But this is, you know, going to be, these two ridings in Chilliwack will be very interesting to see how they go.
So DJ, líya is an Indigenous candidate. So usually it's based on community and most Indigenous people usually vote for the community, kind of NDP values. How do you think that's rustling feathers maybe in the community? I'm hearing out there that, you know, there's a lot of chiefs that aren't supporting, they're supporting the NDP. So do you think that there's going to be that shift in that, you know, 8 to 9% of the population that, you know, that was maybe was a goal of the Conservative Party to draw them away from the NDP? Or do you think it'll be solid and that they'll be out there to vote for the party that they usually go for?
You know, I guess we will find out. I don't want to speak on behalf of any of our First Nations communities here in the riding or in our communities. I think it is a really interesting race there. I also think that it's fantastic that there are folks stepping up to put their names forward as candidates who don't look like the usual candidate in our communities or even look like me. And
population
I think
boom.
That always needs to be supported and applauded, and seeing yourself represented in the candidates who are running is really important. But there's such interesting aspects and pieces to that specific race, and being you know, an Indigenous woman, mother running for a party that is potentially, whose values don't necessarily align with what you're standing for, and some of the First Nations communities around here don't agree on many things, on whether it be projects or whether it be refilling the Maahs Lake, for example, is a really interesting piece that is important to our community and our surrounding communities. And I know you all recall the 2021 atmospheric river as we're experiencing another one tonight, this evening. But, you know, the BC Conservatives came out supporting refilling the Maahs Lake. And I haven't had a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with líya myself personally, and so I don't know how where she stands on that or how she feels about it. But these are really interesting. Like, that's just one example of the many interesting dynamics across the communities, and I'm kind of wondering if you have more commentary on that or your thoughts of what you're seeing in the experiences, because I think it's kind of a combination of both. There's, folks are still going to vote for a party whose values align for them, but, folks may decide to vote for, like, a candidate that, like, means something to them.
Reconciliation is being played out right across the country, and it's also being played out, at the local level and the provincial level as well. But I want to back up just a little bit. Let's go to the higher level, because I know a lot of people are watching this election in British Columbia, John, and especially the Conservatives, to see if this is the bellwether. If this is going to be the one that, things are starting to move in our favor. We see BC moving like the rest of the prairie provinces with a lot of Conservative support. Do you think that that's happening, that this could be a factor on things that might come, maybe in a federal election next year?
Well, I think the impact or the effect is the other way. Because there is some validity to the argument, I believe, that John Rustad and the provincial Conservatives are riding the coattails of Pierre Poilievre and the federal Conservatives, rather than the other way around. So obviously, should the BC Conservatives win tonight, for sure, federal Conservatives will be paying attention and picking through the entrails to figure out, what were those aspects of the campaign that worked. But the way I read the federal political scene right now is the federal Conservatives have pretty much got their act together. They've had a very successful year or two behind them now. So I don't think it's going to have too much impact on the federal political scene. I really don't think so. Will it have impact on other provincial races that are yet to be held this fall? That's possible. But, we live in a country that is so large. Do you really think that the BC election will have any impact on New Brunswick? I doubt it very much.
No, but federally, it might be, because, that was Kevin Falcon, that's what he said. Like, he said, they got the C, so, let's move over, here and run with them. But I want to ask you the question, because I did ask you earlier, like, is that even legal? Like, is it in their bylaws that just that one leader can make that decision and everyone else is just standing, looking in, going, what just happened here?
It's not a question of legal. I mean, in the party constitution, as I understand it, it gives the leader the right and the responsibility to approve every candidate, which inherently also means he can disapprove of every candidate. And so he made the call that they were facing mission impossible. In my view, the responsible call. But he should have made it a little bit earlier, frankly, because a lot of us were standing around shaking our heads saying, Kevin, you're going nowhere fast. At one point, he was polling at 9 points in the polls. Get used to the idea, you're done. And he finally, he made the right call, but maybe left it a little late.
So what about that party itself? I mean, they still exist.
Legally,
right?
yes.
Legally, yes. So are they just waiting? Is that what happens now? Or, like, what's the future of that party?
I don't think that they've had that conversation yet.
Okay.
And sure, that party, the legal framework still exists. There's a very long list in British Columbia of legal political parties. I think it's something like 25 names long. The Social Credit Party still exists, and there are many like that. So, they will try and sort this out, I'm sure, over the next number of months. What is the future for them? And to some extent, I think that'll be conditioned by the result of the vote tonight.
And
I think it goes back to that, why did Falcon wait so long? Is that gamble, that what kind of power might we have or can we achieve in this? And that took that decision so long. And then to go back to your kind of question between provincial and federal politics and campaigns as well. I think this is a really important point to touch on and talk about from a local perspective, because we are in unique, interesting times where the dynamics of politics are frankly scary. They're scary right now. There's a massive polarization, and I actually agree with John that I think the BC Conservatives are on this. You're picking up and benefiting from an uptake on like a conservative realignment in the province that is federal. I've spoken to many people who cast a vote in this provincial election to get rid of Trudeau. Yeah. And this is, that's a challenge that we need to have a discussion and unpack as a community of what that means and what this looks like, and how did we get to a place where we're voting not for necessarily like the people that we want or that we support and care about, but the people the people against someone, and someone that we don't like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, lots going to happen in the next half an hour. We're going to know pretty quick. So off to Dawn. Let's check in.
Louis, we are taking a look at the clock that we have that is synced up with Elections BC. We now have 33 minutes until the polls close. Something that has come up on social media, and John Les and I have talked about this off air, there are a number of ridings that are in the Mountain Time Zone. So what happens with them? Well, they go 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. our time. Once we're done, they're done, 8 o'clock arrives, then we can talk about all the ridings. Right now, we can't say anything because people are still voting. Having said that, we are following Environment Canada. We have, of course, been following this atmospheric river, Pineapple Express, if you will. We really don't know if it's affecting voting, and we'd like to hear from you on our social media. Let us know if you've had any issues. We do know Highway 1 has had some problems with water pooling and such, but a lot of people are still getting out and about. The other thing is the advance polls. Elections BC has said that this has been a record year. So over 1 million people have already voted prior to today. We're going to see how that plays in, and then, of course, with the weather. There are a couple of other things that have been happening with this weather, and for Valley Husker fans, I know this is rubbing it in, but the Okanagan Sun did beat West Shore 23-17 in the Cullen Cup. They will take on the Prairie champion next week. In the CFL, the BC Lions, yes, they won big, 27-3 over Montreal. They're 9-9. They will go to Regina next week in the CFL playoffs. Chilliwack Chiefs, they are in Prince George to take on the Spruce Kings. The Chilliwack Jets are taking on the Mission City Outlaws. So now you are up to date. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be back as our election coverage continues right here on Chill TV.
Welcome back, everyone. And if you do hear some rain sounds, it's actually on the roof. We're pretty well on near the rooftop here at the vineyard, and every now and then, when it really starts to come down, you might start to hear it in your homes and through the microphones here. But we're okay. Everything's nice and dry, so we'll continue with Councillor Jason Lum. He's been serving Chilliwack community as a councillor since 2011. He spent over 10 years working hard on issues important to the region. Jason has represented both the City of Chilliwack and the broader Fraser Valley as the board chair of the Fraser Valley Regional District, the president of the Lower Mainland Local Government Association, and a director on the board of the Union of BC Municipalities. Credits also include the Chilliwack Creative Commission, Fraser Valley Regional Hospital Board, vice chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee, and has spent his entire political career working to make positive changes for folks here in Chilliwack. Please welcome Jason Lum. Jason, how are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Considerably less than last election 2020. Less nervous. So nice to be here.
Well, you know, we always called you, it was like the Lum effect, right? Okay, because you were just coming in a little bit toward the, like when the things were, we kind of knew who the candidates were, right? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, Jason Lum's going to come in and run as an independent. Maybe speak a little bit about what that decision was like, and why did you decide to run as an independent?
Yeah, I was joking earlier that I was getting bored during COVID. It'd been a couple of years since I'd run in an election, so I wanted something to do. But honestly, it was an interesting time, obviously, in 2020, and it was an interesting time provincially. I looked at the options in the riding that I was in, and it looked to me like there might be an opening for that rare time when an independent could be successful. Didn't turn out to be the case, but I certainly don't regret trying. It was exciting, and I learned a lot.
Yeah. So a lot of people do think that you were that factor in there that maybe, scooted Kelli up the middle. DJ, what do you think about that?
I think it's possible, certainly breaking that down. But in terms of people voting for, again, parties or values and where that aligns, and then also the candidate they wish to see them represented, I think that works both ways and moves across both camps. So I don't think that's necessarily entirely a voting base for someone, a community, a stronghold like Jason Lum is necessarily pulling from one camp or the other to create that situation. And it's just interesting to examine the effect that an independent candidate can have on a race and in general. And that's where we are right now as well. There's a number of independent candidates running. Yeah,
and so maybe just continue, Jason, on because we have that sort of now happening in the north, Chilliwack North. Is that going to be the same situation? Do you think there's going to be that influence? But everyone knew you, though. That's the one thing, right? They knew your face. Who doesn't love Jason, right? And
there's a few people out there.
I'm not sure if that's going to play out this election on Chilliwack North. John, what do you think?
Well, Chilliwack North is actually a fairly traditional setup, this ballot. I mean, you've got the two main parties, I would say, the BC NDP and the BC Conservatives, and then you have a Green candidate, which we've had many times before, and then one independent candidate who decided, I believe, sort of at the last minute to throw his name in as well. All four of them very, articulate and whatnot, so it'll be interesting. So I would say Chilliwack North is fairly traditional setup with four candidates. Chilliwack Cultus-Lake, a little bit more interesting in that we have rarely seen just a one-on-one matchup.
Yeah, and so we were speaking a little bit earlier. Both of you are pretty knowledgeable, maybe some of the bellwether ridings that could go either way. What are your thoughts on some of the ridings that we need to watch tonight?
Well, I think there's a situation as well, Louis, where there are some well-known, big-name independents that are running in races across the province. John and I were talking earlier about Tom Shapikta up in the north, and I think there's Karen Kirkpatrick is running. Dan Davies, Mike Bernier. There's a lot of them former BC United, BC Liberal candidates who have run in those and been successful in those ridings, successive elections, and so having them in the race and having that name recognition, I think it could be a factor. Overall, I think it's one of the highest number of independent, non-affiliated candidates in this election. I think there's over 50.
70.
Yeah. So there's quite a few that are running, and I would say very high-profile candidates. It's tough to get elected as an independent in the province, anywhere, not just the province of British Columbia. Vicky Huntington, I think, was first and only in 70 years. 70
Wow.
years. Yeah. So, and they asked Vicky, I think, I read an interview with her, what it was, and she said it was that name recognition and an angry electorate. So those
I
are
think
the two things that
so.
got her.
I was part of the governing party that time. We made this stupid decision, or I wasn't involved in it, believe you me. There was a stupid decision made to parachute Molly Opal into that riding as the BC Liberal candidate.
Yeah.
And people in Delta South said, huh? He's not of our community. It was seen as cynical and, like I said, stupid. And Vicky Huntington came up and said, well, I'm running as an independent. And of course, she was well known, had served on the Delta Council there for years and years and years. She not only got elected, she got reelected.
Wow.
I will say this as well, because I was there during that time, that she was the loneliest person in the legislature. And she really was. Didn't have a caucus. There was, all of us had our caucus meetings and things like that. So I'd go and see her once in a while just to try to be, polite and whatnot, but really quite an independent person, unless the majority of the government depends on it, can be a very lonely existence in Victoria, and I'm sure in Ottawa as well. Same with Jody Wilson-Raybould, for example, went from justice minister and then became independent, and to me looked like she was the loneliest person in Ottawa at that point.
Yeah.
That's the harsh reality of politics, and it's not pretty.
Is there some other ridings that you're keeping an eye on, John?
Not to go too far from home here, Fraser-Nicola is interesting in that Agassiz and Harrison are now included in that riding. There's West Vancouver Sea to Sky is an interesting one. That could be a three-way race with the Greens being very strong in that riding. Victoria Beacon Hill, where Sonia Furstenau is running for the first time. And Vancouver Point Grey, where apparently David Eby is in a big fight for that riding. So we'll be watching those with real interest.
Yeah, that's interesting to watch. Now, let's talk a little bit about that independent block again. Like, could that actually be, like, say, a block? If you were an independent candidate and there was maybe 2 or 3 of you that did get elected this time around, what do you think your thoughts are?
Well, as I said earlier, if I was elected independent tonight, I would keep my cards very close to my chest.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be making any rash decisions. It's potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah.
Potentially. Maybe not. It all depends on all the other dynamics that are playing out at the same time. But in the unlikely scenario where there's 4 or 5 of them elected, they'll play a role. My guess would be they'd all get together and form under one of the party umbrellas, maybe BC United again. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
So impossible to say at this point. There'd be a lot of different scenarios, but it'll all depend on, if there's a comfortable majority by one of the 2 parties tonight, New Democrat or Conservative, then, the independents aren't going to play too much of a role. But if you have 2 parties sitting at around 45 seats each or something like that, then it gets interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting times. I want to talk a little bit about the redistribution and maybe what that means to both ridings now. Jason, what about the North? What do you think is going to happen there? Do we have more of a concentration, do you think, of maybe the right coming together, or is it going to be more difficult, for Dan this time around? What are your thoughts? And then I'll go to DJ after that.
I think traditionally, I think some of those places like the Greendales and the Popcombs and the Rosedales would break more for conservative candidates, and I think Dan inherited some of those areas. So, It's hard to say. Kelly got Euro. If I had known, in 2020, if I had drawn a card that got me Euro, it would have been maybe not a deal breaker or a difference maker, but I would have definitely preferred to have my hometown in there. But so I think, just being a Euro guy, I always say whoever gets Euro is lucky to have. So we'll see how. But again, far from certain. But I think Chilliwack North got tougher just with the number of candidates there. There's more opportunity for a split there versus that one-on-one and in Chilliwack Cultus-Lake. I think I think both the power of incumbency brings you a certain could be a certain advantage. Some would argue, in some cases a disadvantage. I think I've had the opportunity to work closely with both of our current MLAs, and we've had this has been a tough. Getting elected in 2011, there've been a lot of tough issues that just faced in the city of Chilliwack, but just across the province. And so, nobody saw the kind of things coming, like the nobody had pulled in the bingo card, pandemic, heat dome, atmospheric river, major disasters. And so there's a lot of stuff that all folks in government had to deal with, and I give credit to where credit is due for people who worked hard throughout those events. But I think out of the two, Dan's probably got it tougher.
He's got a little
I
bit of
think he's got a hill to climb there. I want to go back. You said about the split last go round and running against Kelly, and I didn't know Kelly at all. I met her on our first All Canada. I think I met her at a Chill TV event. It was the first one we had, the first debate, and so I didn't know her, but. Some people have said that I played the spoiler, and I want to be careful that it's not taking away from somebody else's accomplishment in the campaigns that they ran. Yeah. And so I put my best foot forward, did what I could, and was very proud of it, and was a bit of an underdog in it. But saying that I was because I ran, somebody else got in or somebody else lost. Taking away from. It takes away from the candidate from winning, and there was a lot of one thing I would say too is there was a lot of power in having that party backing. The history and the fact I got told a long time ago, Jason, one day you're going to have to pick a side. Yeah, right. You know what? I think I was quoted. I was quoted saying that too. Yeah.
I was like, man, why can't he pick a color? Yeah.
Not today, folks.
Not today. No, you've got lots to bring to the table. And hey, listen, you just look around Chilliwack and the relationships that you've built with First Nations as well. Every corner you turn, there's another building being built, right? So we've got some real progressive things happening, and I think that's because of everyone. And I think that's what's going to take, again, whoever does win, is that bringing together who's going to develop those relationships.
Can I just add one thing, Louis? Sure. I agree with Jason that Dan Coulter is probably in a little bit tougher than Kelly in some ways.
Yeah.
But because the other riding is a two-person race this time, to win, Kelly would have to grow her vote from 36% to over 50%. In other words, she'd have to outperform the provincial party. That's a big challenge. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. But you're kind of stuck on, the NDP has that core, and that is always the core. I believe that core actually changes, because especially now when you've got some people who might be BC United people who would have normally put their park their car in that garage, they won't park it there. They might move to the center left.
Did any of you get that impression that the BC United candidate who was Sue Knott, who was a well-known city councillor, name recognition. Did any of you get that impression that her being out of the race, people were kind of disgruntled, like BC Liberal or BC United folks were disgruntled, and maybe enough that they would shift their alliance, or maybe not even come out? Like, that'll be interesting too.
That, I think, is the more likely scenario, that some people, if they are disaffected, might just stay home.
Stay home.
Yeah.
DJ.
Yeah, some interesting boundary changes always mix things up and make things very challenging. But both Dan and Kelly have represented this community for this last term. So they're running on their ability to continue to do that, and the actions that they have taken to support our community members and work that they're doing in the legislature, and that's what people are looking to right now. And I do think it's going to be really interesting. And in the absence of that, the BC United Party folding and having what is viewed by the voters as like a centrist-based party, this is why it's so interesting to have Jason here, who ran last time independently, create a very interesting situation where independent folks running, whether they were previously on the BC United ticket or not, get elected, potentially have an opportunity for significant power in the legislature, especially when it potentially is going to be very close in terms of the seats on the other end of this. And that interesting role of who do you want to best represent you in the legislature, and what does that mean? What can you actually achieve as an independent candidate? And I know that you've got a lot to say on that, but certainly, the parties in terms of foreign platforms and governance experience offers a significant amount in that. And Dan is, Kelli wasn't super well known previous to running, but she certainly is now as the incumbent, and I hope folks have seen her contribution to this community. Dan was known previous to running, and that's also interesting in itself, in that the dynamic of Dan running against Heather, and they've spent time on that Chilliwack school board, our favorite school board in the province, right? Is an interesting dynamic of how that is going to play out, and what that's going to look like for sure.
Yeah, definitely. How about campaigns now? We've got Tim Cooper and Dan Grice now. Have they been visible enough, do you think, that's they're even going to make a difference in this election?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, when you're running as an independent, obviously you don't have a party leader who's out there kind of carrying the bag for you and getting the airtime and getting the higher profile events. So you're already kind of behind the eight ball. I think with Dan, I know Dan personally. I know Tim as well, not as well, but Dan, I think. You probably would have seen him align closer with the Greens in elections past, and so it was interesting. He's a lawyer, and so he has some things to say about changes to the Law Society and things that have happened, and so I think he was kind of motivated in that way to run. But I would probably characterize him as a center left, more of a center left leaning vote, but also, you check in with the electorate. I'm not sure how sympathetic they are to, I mean, no disrespect to lawyers, but, there was, the narrative out there maybe that changes needed to happen. And so we'll see if that resonated, if maybe that specific thing that meant a lot to him resonated with the rest of the public and the electorate. I'm happy, whenever there are the major parties are able to field candidates in all the ridings. I think it's a good sign, and it's a healthy sign for our democracy. But I also don't like, so when so it's a good thing for me when I see a local person like Tim running for the Greens.
Step
and people
up.
I don't know that I'm as excited when people get parachuted in that aren't really known to the community as well.
Yeah, John.
I went to the all candidates meeting at the Cultural Center, and regrettably there aren't enough of those. That's something I've seen a real change over the years. But anyway, the all candidates meeting at the Cultural Center, I thought Dan Grice made a very good presentation. Had a number of issues that were interesting. Showed that he's just not running as somebody he just wanted to see his name on the ballot, but he had a couple of things that he was really advocating for, and agree or disagree, they were interesting issues, and he presented well, and So as an independent, he probably won't get very far, unfortunately for him. Tim Cooper, on the other hand, is part of a larger party, the Greens. And when you looked at the TV debate last week on Global, most people would form the consensus that Sonia Furstenau won that debate.
Yeah.
She presented well, she was articulate and everything else. So you get somebody who's, considered locally perhaps as a minor party candidate, yet could pick up some votes because Sonia Furstenau did really well.
Yeah.
And so he may benefit from that.
Yeah, and I'm sort of looking at some of the stats here with the Greens. Like, do you think they're going to do as well as they did last time? I mean, I'm looking at 15.09% for what the Greens got in 2020. Do you think they're going to be there this time, or do you think they're not? Because I don't see much like I used to see with the Green Party. So I'm not too sure if most of their platform has been taken over, maybe by the NDP or some with BC United. How do you think they're going to play out on this one?
I don't think they have fielded as many candidates this year as they have previously. So whether that plays a role into that overall popular vote or not, I'm not sure. I agree. Sonia presented extremely well in that debate, and so if people are voting for the leader of a party, potentially they see numbers like that. But given the overall state of the party and field of candidates, just like in terms of quantity, I'm not sure that will actually translate.
So, I mean, this is the second time for Tim, right? Like, he's run 2 elections in a row.
At least. Yeah.
So what's the draw? Do you think it's going to be there again? This is his 3rd time, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's my question is, are they going to be a factor in like Chilliwack North or not?
I don't think so.
An unknown, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, he'll get the usual share of the vote. I don't think it would differ too much from 2020. And like I say, his leader did well, and that always helps out candidates. Just like John Rustad not doing so well last week, well, that's not helpful to the overall campaign.
Yeah.
Those things are important. And people aren't necessarily looking at a leader in deciding how they're going to vote. It is part of the equation, though, and what that leader has to say and how they present their issues and the solutions that they present are important.
Yeah.
And that goes right back to people deciding at home how they're going to vote in their local riding.
Yeah.
And
true.
going back to the kind of redistribution, Sonia, again, I think she probably drew a tough card there on the island where she was elected, so she's moved ridings now. So she's over in Beacon Hill, and what many would consider is a very strong NDP seat. She's running against Grace Lohr. Now, I think some of the polls that I've seen on that one is that it's neck and neck. So that'll be very interesting to see if she has enough profile as a party leader to make a breakthrough there. That would probably be bad news for the NDP. They were probably counting on that seat to help form their a majority if they're going to get one. I know Adam Olson, who was the other Green as well, as the deputy leader and being through, the confidence supply agreement. He toured the province when he was an interim leader for the Greens, built some profile. He came out to Chilliwack, and one of the first meetings I had when I was elected, he was kind of knocking at the door saying, hey, what's important to you guys out here? So I know Adam fairly well. It was a bit of a surprise to see him step down at Saanich North and the Islands. Yep. But the fella who's actually taking over there, Rob Botterill, is a fairly well-known name, at least in local government circles, because he's a former municipal lawyer. I think he was with Lidstone and Company for a while, and Rob is a well-known name there, and so he has a chance. And then the other Green, I think, who's got a good shot is running in Sea to Sky. And that's Jeremy Valeriot. Jeremy actually on election night, and I hope for his sake that it's less stressful, because I think he was announced as the winner by 6 votes, so there was an automatic recount, came back, and I think Jordan Sturdy ended up taking that one. But Jordan's not in the race anymore, former BC United, BC Liberal. And they've got, who's there, Yuri Fulmer and Jen Ford. Jen Ford's a high-profile NDP candidate, she would be a score for any party, former president of the UBCM, a regional district chair there at the SLRD, and a councillor in Whistler. And so she's a high-profile candidate, but I think she's in tough. She's in a lot tougher than people would think in that riding.
Yeah. So we're down to the last couple of minutes. Any last words, or you think it's going to come in real quick and
Well, if
we're going to know? Or
If you haven't gotten to the polls yet, you've got 4 minutes to do so. If you are in the
you're in line,
you can vote. And it's so important that you do vote. And I hope everyone in our communities have taken that opportunity to do so. It is going to be interesting to see how quick we get results here coming in.
I said my 95-year-old grandmother walked to the polling station today in the rain. If she can do it, anyone can get out there and do it.
In terms of the results tonight, I understand they're going to come in real quick, real fast, and we could have all of the results by 9 o'clock or so.
all right, hang on to your hats. We're going to go to Dawn, and let's get going. We'll come back and have a little commentary after.
John, you brought up a very good point, and this is quoting the Elections BC website on electronic tabulators, and I'm quoting, "We'll be using electronic tabulators to count the paper ballots in this election to allow voters to vote at any voting place, allowing Elections BC to report results faster on election night." We will see. This is the interesting part. Tabulators are secure. They undergo rigorous testing. They are not connected to the internet, which prevents hacking. Physical access to tabulators is limited to election officials and controlled through a chain of custody processes. Tabulators are tested before they're used. The tests observed by party representatives and candidates. Tabulators are, quote, not voting machines. They simply count the voter-marked paper ballots and then provide the results. Voter-marked ballots are the gold standard in election administration because a paper ballot, quote, cannot be hacked. All ballots retained after they are counted, which allows Elections BC to audit results and perform the recounts. And in close races, of course, the ballots are going to be recounted by hand. We are just under 2 minutes left until we can tell you what is going on. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a break. You are watching live election coverage of the 2024 provincial election and only on Chill TV.
Welcome back, and slowly, we don't see anything yet, but we're all sitting on pins and needles here. Jason, we talked about that independent, or what do you think is going to come in first? Or do you think we're going to get like the time zone?
No, that makes no difference because
they're all released
in
at
those
once?
3 ridings, they close at 9 o'clock,
Okay.
which is our 8 o'clock.
Okay. So we're all looking at the screen waiting. I
Waiting
know.
for
Well,
results to
it's
come
going to
in.
be 15, 20 minutes before anything of
Oh,
any...
yeah, you
yeah.
think
And
so,
so
eh? Nothing early.
We talked about earlier how which ridings we're kind of keeping an eye on and
Yeah.
things that we're watching. And I'm glad that Jason is here as well because I think what's really interesting, and you mentioned a couple of folks that you know kind of who are running provincially, who held like elected municipal positions or, school board positions. And what difference do you think that makes in terms of being a candidate provincially?
I think you benefit from the name recognition. I think there is a benefit. I mean, even speaking about Sonia. Sonia was an electoral area director for the regional district before she was elected to the legislature, and so, I think it helps with that profile. I think it helps with that a very localized understanding of the issues. So, it was, 93? There's 93 separate elections happening tonight, right? So, and you often focus on this big, the provincial message and the platforms and that kind of thing, but ultimately each local riding is gonna decide what happens this evening, and so having that understanding of what buttons you can push locally and what's maybe something that resonates stronger with folks in your specific riding. So I think having local government experience or school board experience gives you a bit of that advantage as well. There's some folks that I think running from local government that may be running motivated because they don't like what has happened provincially the last number of years. Just the same as there's a number of people running because they want to, I think the NDP for many years has kind of looked to local government as some of their bench strength. So their farm team a bit, and so having a pick of some strong candidates, and there are a few for sure.
Well, in some ways, that's the situation we have in Chilliwack North, where Heather Maahs has been on school board, I believe, since 2008. And there's been a lot of controversy that she was very much a part of. So that name recognition is certainly there. Jason mentioned Sonia Furstenau. Not only was she a regional district director, but there was an issue in that region of
Lake,
hers, and she was a leading advocate for the certain position. Some of the details escape me now, but she made her name there.
Contaminated soil.
Yeah.
And then she ran in the provincial election, and there was a major carryover of support that she enjoyed at the regional level that propelled her into provincial office.
Sure, yeah. And we saw Gwen O'Mahony too, who's, we're going to be watching that closely and see how well she does in Lanceville. And
Yeah, except that, her previous political experience is here in Chilliwack, and now
Absolutely.
she's running in Nanaimo, so
yeah.
I'm
And
not
she
sure
broke that glass ceiling, right, I think. And, it was the first time we had another party other than a conservative-leaning party that was, was able to be representative in that area.
Cons with 3.
Ah. Yeah, we're starting to get some results.
Well, leading in 3, that's...
Yeah.
so,
With very few polls coming
Yeah.
through
Oh,
yeah.
right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But
all of these are just teasers.
Oh, I know, yeah. But, that's what we love, right? We like watching it and doing the play-by-play and,
Yeah.
we do. Josie Osborne coming out of municipal politics,
right.
watching the Esquimalt riding really closely. Darlene Rochford running out there, who's on council. These are exciting. Any other we're excited about?
Like, who are the stars? Who are the, we want them to get in no matter what the party is because we know that they're really good leaders and they've got some great ideas. Maybe, Jason, would you know some of them out there?
It's interesting because now I've been through, 3 provincial, this will be my 3rd, I think, provincial election. And so as a local government person, I'm there to work with anybody who anybody who gets elected, and kind of before I ran independently, that was kind of the pitch that I made to the voters was how are you going to make a change in Victoria? Well, I still pride myself on the fact that I can go to Victoria and I don't get kicked out of the legislative dining room because I can kind of hop from table to table. I've got friends on all in all parties and all sides, and have a good conversation and a healthy debate with all of them. That being said, there are a few people that I served with in local government side, and so I guess if it's okay, I could probably say somebody like Jen Ford.
We've got some info coming from Don.
Well, we're still waiting on Chilliwack. And again, very, very early, the Conservatives leading in 347 is the magic number. But we do have one poll reporting out of Abbotsford South. Bruce Banman is leading Sarah Cooner, Conservatives leading the NDP by about 60 votes. But again, that's one ballot box. And of course, this could be a long night. But that's one name we are going to be following, is Bruce Banman, who did cross the floor from BC United over to the Conservatives. Back to you guys.
Yeah, so there's always talk about this orange wall, like in the Lower Mainland. Are we going to see that broken tonight?
What's an orange wall?
Well, it's that Surrey bit that has been sort of really orange for so long.
It's a bellwether. I mean, Surrey, Richmond, Delta, those areas are going to play a big role tonight. As they go, so could the election go. With Surrey going almost solid NDP last time around.
Yeah.
Every gain there for the Conservatives gets them closer to the goal. I think we'll see some changes in Richmond. I know that there was some real dissatisfaction in the Chinese community around the decriminalization of drugs. And so we could see a couple of Conservatives elected there as a result of that. The population of the Lower Mainland is changing too, including the Fraser Valley, including Chilliwack. Let's not lose sight of that. We've seen tremendous population increases. So I just mentioned the Chinese community. They have their own voting patterns and political preferences. So we've certainly seen major immigration from the Sikh community over the years, and they're very politically active. So all of these things play a role, and let's not assume that what was is what is today.
Yeah.
The demographics are changing so much in the Fraser Valley, as well as the Lower Mainland for sure. That does that orange wall actually exist anymore, and what is changing, and how is affordability and housing prices playing a role in that?
We saw numbers, I think it was just at the Housing Summit this year, and it was looking at in-migration in the province of British Columbia, and the number of folks moving out of Metro Vancouver was predominantly moved into the Fraser Valley, into three main communities really, Chilliwack, Abbotsford, and Mission, the bulk of which were going to Abbotsford and Chilliwack. So you saw a lot of people who were leaving the Metro Vancouver area coming into the Fraser Valley, and that looking at some of these communities, not a monolith. There's no guarantee. It's very, I think, issue focused for sure. So
and with that brings challenges, right? Like infrastructure. Is the infrastructure keeping up with the pace of the housing that's going on? Goodness sake, I live in Sardis, right on Keith Wilson, and you come off Peach, and I tell you, your life's in your hands if you're trying to make a left-hand turn. Like, it's really, things have changed a lot, and I've been in that area since 1997.
No, absolutely, and I think that's going to be top of mind for me as a local government person. Thinking about what commitments have been made around infrastructure. Of course, we saw a $1 billion investment from the NDP and the Growing Communities Fund, the GCF, which went straight into infrastructure in local government in local governments across the province. There's commitments. It looks like Mr. Rustad has taken a bit of that out of the NDP playbook. But looks like we're going to Don again.
Go ahead, Don.
We are following right now as the polls have been closed for a few minutes now. The Conservatives are leading or elected in 37, the NDP leading or elected in 27, the Greens leading or elected in 1. We finally are getting some numbers from the Chilliwack area, Chilliwack Cultus-Lake, and again, 4 out of 15 voting areas reporting, and it is very tight between líya, Warbus and Kelli Paddon. The Conservatives leading the NDP by about 450 votes, but again, very early in the day. We're still waiting on numbers for Chilliwack North, and then scrolling down, we've had a number, some serious numbers from Abbotsford, and just let me find Bruce Banman now with 2,600 votes. This is Abbotsford South. Banman, the Conservative Party. Sarah Cooner with the BC NDP with 1,570 votes. And of course, this is far from over. Back to you guys.
Excellent. Yeah, it's pretty exciting as it all comes in. John, so what do you make of that? What's happening in Chilliwack so far? Á'a seems to be a little bit ahead right now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that. I said earlier, for Kelli to win tonight, she's got to improve her vote from 36% to over 50%. That would be unbelievable if she were able to do that, and frankly, I don't think she'll be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
That's just political reality. So I don't think we've heard any results yet from Chilliwack North, but I expect that one to be in the Conservative column as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Right now, province-wide, it looks very interesting for the Conservatives, but too soon to call it.
It's too soon, but we just talked about that little bit of an orange wall, and it's not so orange right now. So, but like we say, it's pretty early.
Sea to sky.
So it's sea to sky that we're looking at.
Yeah,
That's
so that looks
green?
like Jeremy Valeri at the green in West Van, sea to sky.
Yep.
Again,
Banman
super
sitting at
early,
60%.
but yeah, but quite impressive. That one's interesting right there. Mid Island Pack Rim. That's Josie Osborne.
Yep.
A minister.
Abbotsford West,
She's in a
Neck and
dead
neck, eh?
heat.
Dead
Yeah.
heat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Early polls
It's-
there.
it's-
Pam Alexis, closer to home, another minister and a former local government person. She's in second. Renee Gaspar in Mission.
Yeah, and we're looking for, we haven't seen any independents so far.
No.
We're still waiting.
No. Well, as I said before, if you're, if you're an independent, you're in tough from the start, and it's historically next to impossible. Vicky Huntington was the one and only in 70 years in British Columbia to get elected as independent.
Wow, incredible.
So it's a tough order.
Yeah, and there's Rustad right there. So
Yeah, well, he's going to win his own
ahead,
riding,
yeah.
I would think. That's
Yeah.
a pretty safe call.
It was
looks like
interesting
that's a
though.
good
There
one.
was some discussion there that Mr. Rustad hadn't even met with his own mayor and council at a certain point. I heard, there was
Yeah.
some rumblings there.
I heard those same things, and I personally I put them down to sour grapes. And so far tonight, he's showing a 73% support. Those are the same people, that went to the polls there.
Yeah.
So you're always in politics. You're going to get some elbowing and things like that. I think they called it that in hockey, and you get that in politics as well. So at the end of the day, the people have voted, and we're now seeing how the count will come in.
there we go, Heather Maahs.
So it looks
We
like,
have some things showing
Looks
up.
like 78%.
78%. Woof.
That's remarkable, but
That's
again, it's
remarkable,
early.
and
It's early,
there's,
folks.
that's
59.
There we go.
And 40.
Yeah,
Warbus,
she's 59.
Yeah.
I
So-
think that Chilliwack North is one poll reporting.
Okay.
Yeah. These
Yeah.
are.
But would those be normally the smaller polls that start coming in first? They get counted faster, or
I think it
is there?
depends who's
Not
got
sure.
a lineup where there's still
Yeah.
people voting.
I don't know what that is anymore, Jason, because now all these results are all
Yeah.
coming in electronically.
Yeah.
Right.
It used to be in the old days, in the early '80s when I was first running, it would be polls like Ryder Lake that would come in last
Yeah.
because somebody physically had to drive
Drive it,
from
yeah.
Ryder
Oh
Lake
my goodness.
into the campaign or
There's
the
Dan
electoral
there,
office.
18. Yeah, Heather's at 78.1%
Yeah, but
so
those-
far. Yeah.
As I said, I think Heather will win that riding, but I'd be shocked if she won it by to the tune of 78%.
Yeah.
And these numbers, 37, 27, they've been stuck there for quite some time. I think it's going to be the next dump of info that's going
That's going to come up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they seem to be coming in from all over the province, not just one area.
There's Ian Payton
So-
there. I think that's in Delta.
Interesting.
Delta, yeah.
Fully expect him to win that riding. Again, I think it's a two-person race.
That was an interesting one because that was one of the few BC United and Conservative ones where you had a
Yeah.
kind of a coalescence there and had
That's right.
the,
Ian
the
became-
United candidate come in.
That's right. Yeah, there were several others as well, but Ian was certainly one of them. And guaranteed, if the Conservatives form government tonight, he'll be the Minister of Agriculture. I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
He's widely recognized amongst all parties as being having strong and deep roots in agriculture.
It's funny that you bring up agriculture because that was one of the issues that didn't come up as much in any of the platforms and any of the discussion that came across. You know, ag and food processing, of course, super important to the Fraser Valley, and it was way down on the list
We're now
of
looking at
issues.
45-45.
Okay, now, yeah, look at that, hey? Yeah.
Well, and especially in the Fraser Valley, food security and so much of our, dairy and egg quantities for the entire province comes from the Fraser Valley. And what
Yeah.
are we doing around food security?
Well, and what are
here?
we doing to protect it too? Look at, with what's happening with the atmospheric rivers. I mean, that was a disaster for us. I remember crossing Sumas. I was on my way to a flight to Ottawa. I never made it home for another 3 weeks after that because we literally were just completely
Interesting,
flooded out.
this notion of food security, and at the same time, we're also talking about reflooding Sumas Lake. I don't see how those two things add up together. I really don't get that.
They don't.
One of the food baskets of our province is Sumas Prairie, as we now call it. To willfully and wantonly, I would argue, just go and reflood it
There was
makes no
that
sense.
was an early controversy. I think the Conservatives had a commentator on. I think it was the
CBC.
president of the party on, and kind of said, well, it's that's the option is to flood Sumas Lake, and I think they quickly backed away from that. I had some
I would hope
candid
so.
words with Mr. Bandman out there, who I sat around the regional district table with
Right.
for many years. So.
Yeah. So we've got 2 green seats now. Where's that other one coming from,
It's
Jason?
up- it looks like it's maybe in the Skeena.
so?
I'm not sure. So one is going to be that sea to sky, but I saw a quick glimpse and it looked like a big riding in the northwest.
That would be Skeena.
So
which,
it might be Skeena, which is interesting. I thought that was a
was
riding
Ellis.
with Nathan Cullen is up there, but maybe not.
well, that was
Towards Smithers.
Oh, right.
that
and
was
like-
Ellis Ross's writing before.
Okay, yeah, it was too quick. It came up on the screen
Yeah.
too quick. We could probably find out here fairly quickly. It wasn't on the island, so it doesn't look like it's Sonia's riding. So,
Lisa
two-
Bear
yeah.
leading in Maple Ridge
Yes,
Meadows.
I see that.
And there's Josie again, still in that dead heat on the
Yeah.
island
That's
there.
very close.
Yeah, she was of course the former mayor of Tofino,
Right.
and Sheila Malcolmson's up the island there as well. Now, if you're talking about the Orange Wall in Metro Vancouver, I mean it's the Orange Island.
The Orange Island, you
the
bet.
Orange
Yeah.
Island, I think largely. There's George Anderson. He's a former city councillor in Nanaimo,
There's Gwen
ahead
O'Mahony.
of Gwen O'Mahony
Yeah.
in the other Nanaimo seat there.
And David Eby with 54.7 so far.
And at this point, Eby is ahead in his own riding by a fairly healthy margin.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's Sonia there. So there's
Yeah,
Victoria
neck and neck.
Beacon Hill.
Oh, that's pretty close,
Very
yeah.
Within 2 points.
Yeah.
So that's, if there'd probably be a few people disappointed with the result if this was it right now. With me, maybe not so much because it means they're going to have to work together.
Well,
You know,
and
it's going to mean people have to work together. We come out of local government, and I'm
Yeah, it's
you're
Skeena.
used to
Yeah, okay.
working together. But this is interesting.
There's
I
one-
was
Yeah.
going to ask that
Jeepers.
question about minority governments and how do we actually come up with the best policy that does capture the amount of values and get work done, right? When folks say, we've got an update from Dawn,
Dawn.
I think. Yep.
Global is now saying that John Rustad has been reelected in his riding. But again, 47 is the magic number for a majority. Both the NDP and the Conservatives are leading or elected in 45 each, with the Greens with 2. The last we have for Chilliwack Cultus-Lake. Right now, Líya Warbus has about 58% of the vote, opposed to Kelli Paddon with 42%. And we are still, that's about 10 out of 15 ballots or voting places reporting. And looking at Heather Maahs with 3,200 votes, Dan Coulter with 1,400. We were kind of wondering what was going to happen with the other two, Tim Cooper with the Greens and Dan Grice with as an independent. Grice with 86 votes. Tim Cooper with 198. But again, the number we are looking at for a majority is 47. And right now, both the NDP and the Conservatives leading or elected in 45 each. So again, this is going to be a rather long night as the ballots are being counted. Taking a quick look at Abbotsford, and right now, Rand Gasper of the Conservatives leading Pam Alexis of the NDP. 4,500 votes to 3,500, so about 1,000 there. Bruce Banman with a very comfortable lead in Abbotsford South. He has 7,500 votes to Sarah Cooner with the BC NDP at 4,400 and some change. And Corky Neufeld, who's with the Conservatives, former school board chair in Abbotsford, with the Conservatives leading Graham Hutchison, 2,300 votes to 1,330. But again, the interesting number is it is a dead heat right now, leading or elected, 45 for both the NDP and the Conservatives, 47 is a majority. Back to you.
Wow, pretty amazing. So where do we sit here? Could the Greens be playing, you know?
Well, if this were to be the result in terms of 45, and 2, the Greens would hold the balance of power, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And does this inspire collaboration that actually achieves really good policy and really good things for British Columbians? I think that is the question. Folks are often talking about, a minority government can't get anything done because they aren't able to pass things in the legislature or that type of thing. But historically, a lot of minority governments actually come up with some of our best policies ever. So what does that look like? And does this speak to the overall picture of, you know, the system itself and how things function in our communities and democracy in terms of what's in the best interest of our communities?
Yeah.
We've got some pretty complete results there.
Here we go.
In terms of the 2 Chilliwack ridings.
Yeah, go ahead, John, and explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, well, looking at Chilliwack North, for example, where Heather Maahs is got just about 9,000 votes and running at about 55%. Dan Coulter running at 37.6% and just over 6,000 votes. So that's a lot of votes already in. You could probably call that one. Kelli Paddon with almost 43%, and Líya Warbus at 57%, and that's based on about 11,000 votes. So I would call both those ridings, frankly.
Well, let's take a look, though. Look at the advanced voting for the ballot boxes. Only 1 of 6 reported. Right? And we've just had the biggest advance voting. So how much movement are we going to see with that million votes, right?
What I'm saying, Louis, is that the spread is large enough in both of those ridings that I feel pretty comfortable that at the end of the night, we're going to be looking at that order of finish.
Yeah. So, but again, only 1 of 6 reported in that advance voting,
advance,
right? We know that's big. So let's just, but we don't know the numbers. How many people went out in Chilliwack, right? Either riding.
I'm just out there a little bit saying that those 2 ridings are probably going that way.
Devil's advocate, because it's not over till, you know,
and one other thing
sings.
to keep in mind here, Louis, it's 45, 45, and 2. There's a riding missing there somewhere. There are 93 ridings altogether.
I think it might be that Beacon Hill riding.
Yeah.
Like looking at that Victoria Beacon Hill, it looks like Sonia First Now was leading by 31 votes the last time I checked, but it didn't look like that they had reported that green seat.
So
we could see 3 green seats.
Well, yeah, but there's a riding missing somewhere. You know, because right now that's 92 and there should be 93. So just in terms of if we're talking about the balance of power,
Yeah,
the minority
yeah.
government and that kind of thing, it's important to keep that in mind.
And there's a lot of blue in the Lower Mainland.
And I think,
Yeah.
you know, historically talking about if you were talking about the Orange Wall, you would consider the Lower Mainland, the Fraser Valley, to be traditionally that blue wall or that liberal stronghold. And I think what we're seeing tonight is kind of maybe a return to form. We'll see. Like I said, it might be a little early on the Cultus-Lake one. The Chilliwack North doesn't surprise me. It looks like that one is going to switch. It'll be interesting to see. Well, this is interesting. It's coming up right now. It's Brent Chapman. His name dominated the airwaves for
And not in a
much
good
of the
way.
last couple of weeks, and not in a good way. He's leading in his riding. But yeah, going back to Chilliwack Cultus-Lake. It'd be interesting to see what effect those advanced polls have, if any, when they come in, the 1 of 6 reporting. There was a legislature poll that came out after the advanced polls, and they were talking about both parties kind of claimed victory, saying, you know, we're sure that it was our folks that came out. But
Right. Yeah.
Historically, they would say
So he's ahead now.
a larger turnout in general overall
Yeah.
suits the non-incumbents, and you know, I think when they're looking at advanced polls in general, I think every year has been a record year building upon that. So I don't know that that's a really indication in terms of incumbent or non-incumbents. Seeing the overall voter turnout is what's going to be really important in that, I think, and the voter turnout in general is a really important piece of this
It's going to be
discussion.
really big because, you know, I'm interested to see, like, are people voting the government out or are they voting a government in? You talked a little bit about ideology. You know, have we had enough of, you know, what's happening on the street, not any real solutions, emergency beds, some of them being closed weekends in different parts of the province. Are people really hungry for another idea? Because maybe this one isn't quite working in some of the towns.
That is one of the main motivations always to keep your eye on.
Yeah.
People do tend to vote governments out
Yeah.
as opposed to voting governments in. I remember in 2001 in that election where the BC Liberals took 77 out of 79 seats. Just prior to the formal election campaign, there was a bit of a campaign put on by none other than Kevin Falcon, and it was simply entitled, "Have you had enough yet?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And people responded to that in droves, and it really captured their imagination, and it was sort of the prelude to the election.
Yeah.
But it illustrated again, when people are fed up with the government, as they then were, they then throw them out, as opposed to voting somebody else in. They obviously vote for somebody else, but it was the initial inspiration for that is they're ticked off with what's been going on.
Well, and I think, like, going back, I'm trying to think back through all the campaigns that I've kind of watched with interest, and this campaign itself, it was angry. Like, it felt angry. Like, everybody was angry there, and so I think there's some of the issues. I think maybe if you'd have seen the NDP early on, the platform that they wanted to run on was, you know, they were kind of steady as she goes. They were going to kind of keep we're going to keep moving together. Maybe we've got some challenges, but we're going to be able to fix them. Stick with us. And then you saw, you know, that what happened with BC United and the Conservatives, and then they kind of seemed to throw that out and start reacting more to what was getting thrown at them from the Conservative side. And honestly, it felt like with the Conservative side, it was just mostly just poking holes in all the challenges that are out there, and without maybe offering too many solutions.
No,
So
I think
I'm
just
gonna be
pointing
interested
out,
to
you know,
see
what are
this.
the bread and butter issues, right?
Yeah.
And they stuck to that, and that's really what you were hearing. Not really any solutions that went along with it. They were just saying, are you fed up with this?
But just
food
as an
prices?
example, though, people increasingly became annoyed at the carbon tax.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Conservative response to that is, we're getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So, that's a policy position then, right? And there's others like that. Drug decriminalization, They're not doing that.
I know.
People were upset about that. And so, yes, you're right. They were picking up a number of issues like that resonated with people. And again, it'll be interesting to see tonight whether that created some kind of resonance among the public to the extent that they're prepared to vote in another party for government.
So we've got 48 sitting in the Conservative, 43 the NDP. Where are we at now? And we still have numerous ridings to come in, right?
Some of them I think you can call
Pretty well call.
fairly accurately
Yeah.
now. I saw a quick screen on there about the popular vote, and it looked like the NDP was leading in the popular vote, but maybe not as efficiently in terms of seat count, which is actually the opposite of the narrative that I heard before. This was that the Conservatives might capture the majority of the popular vote, but we'll see what happens.
Let's get a quick update from Don.
We've been watching the numbers literally flip-flop for the last 3 minutes, Louis. The Conservatives leading or elected in 48. 47 is the magic number for a majority government. The NDP with 43, the Greens with 2. Now, with 13 out of 16 reporting for Chilliwack North, Heather Maahs has 9,900 votes, about 55% of the vote, almost 56%. Dan Coulter with 6,600 votes. And then trailing behind Tim Cooper, not doing too badly, all things considered, just under 1,000 votes. Dan Grice with 417. For Cultus-Lake, for Chilliwack Cultus-Lake, 14 out of 15 stations reporting. And líya Warbus with the Conservatives with 8,700 votes. Kelli Paddon with 6,700 votes. And again, we're watching the big numbers. 48 for the Conservatives right now, leading or elected. 43 for the NDP, 2 for the Green. We're going to take a break, catch our breath, and we'll be back right after this on Chill TV.
Welcome back, everyone, and we're watching the results come in. It's looking pretty blue. John, what's going on?
Well, yes, I would say it's encouraging right now if you're a BC Conservative. It's somewhat discouraging if you're supporting the NDP, but it ain't over till it's over, and until every last vote is counted. I'm just watching the thing here, and there's a lot of ridings there that are one way or the other, but very close.
Yeah, and we're looking at that advanced voting. So two out of 6 advanced polls we're in now.
Chilliwack Cultus-Lake.
Yeah,
that's
Chilliwack
right.
Cultus-Lake. We're still keeping an eye on that one.
Yeah, but you know, as we were
That's
talking about in the
12
break, you know, those 2 ridings are going conservative.
Yeah.
I would think that's a pretty safe call.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what happens in Abbotsford Mission, which is a riding adjacent.
Yeah.
Fraser Nicola, that involves Harrison and Agassiz, to see where those ridings are going. I haven't seen any results from those ridings yet. And then, of course, there's ridings like Vancouver Point Grey, which is David Eby's riding.
Yeah.
I saw an early result that showed him leading, but I haven't seen anything since. Jody Furstenau, not sure how she's doing. In,
I think Sonia's back 10 points.
Sonia?
Yeah, it looked like she was kind of close there on Victoria Beacon Hill. Interesting, just on the decision desk there, they're calling Christine Boyle in Vancouver elected. She's a
Interesting.
former,
Yep.
she's a not a current,
councillor.
Vancouver City Councillor. And then it looks like again Coquitlam or Burquitlam there, Rick Glumac, who's a
Right.
former Port Moody councillor. He's it looks like he's ahead or leading there. And I think I saw it flash up in the decision desk
Adrian
that
Dix is in there,
they're
it looks
calling
like.
David Eby elected.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Prince George Mackenzie, Kyle Giddens looks like he's elected. He used to be a staffer back in the day when I was in Victoria.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah. So what's happening in Chilliwack now? Is it the Conservatives went out there, they got out, their vote? What do you think, why the change now? Because I just didn't see a big campaign coming out of either of the candidates. So, was it again, what exactly is the factor? I'd like to know that.
Well,
or was it just that, the votes for Kelli weren't there? The people didn't come out, or?
well, as I said all along, last time she got 36% of the vote.
Yeah.
And there was just no way that she was going to get over 50% of the vote in a two-person race. Just
Yeah.
not going to happen. That would have been, there would have been, a win of gigantic proportions if that had happened. So,
Yeah.
she put up a good fight. Kelli did, absolutely. So did Dan. But, Chilliwack, I think, tonight we see has reverted more to its traditional voting pattern.
Yeah.
So I really, I think, you said, well, there wasn't much of a campaign. Frankly, I touched on it earlier. I think we see a lot less of these campaigns in the community nowadays. Years ago when I first ran, boy, I tell you, we did at least a dozen,
Oh, yeah.
all candidates meetings all
Chilliwack
over the
Healthier
community.
Community, they had one, and then you'd
All
have
the way
to
from
run
Ryder
over
Lake
here
to
and-
Yarrow to Rosedale
Yeah, there was
and every point
all
in
the
between.
time.
And we don't see that today anymore, and I regret that.
Yeah.
We have all of these, text messages that
Sure,
come out from the
yeah.
various parties, and everybody's got a website and all that kind of thing. But it's
Yeah.
not that personal contact that I think is so valuable.
Yeah.
And that I always appreciated as a politician, being able to talk to people face to face.
Mm-hmm.
And so there could well be a perception because of all the electronic warfare that goes on now in an election campaign.
Yeah,
that
and
it's rather
costs,
more
too.
impersonal.
Yeah, sure.
And not as interactive as it might have been in the past.
Yeah.
Even if there's way less debates happening, what we also were seeing in this election and these campaigns is Conservative candidates en masse, like not attending the few debates that there were, so not even making themselves available for those local debates. But also, the rules have changed quite significantly, that it's actually a challenge to host and create that space, even more so now. And does this change the way we interact with politics, and does that add into this anger factor that Jason was mentioning earlier? And how do these demographics and shifts in generations in terms of a younger generation becoming voting age, who are maybe voting differently than their parents did, how are those shifts impacting this overall throughout the province? Because I think that also changes in a bit of a cycle as well, in terms of those communities, and then demographics changing for other factors as well.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say, let's talk, what is the ecosystem right now? We're hearing more and more Conservative coming from the USA, and we're hearing messages and kind of what's going on there. We're hearing it a bit federally. Are we seeing that now in British Columbia? Is there really a almost a blue wave that's coming right over all of North America. Is that what we're seeing now?
I looked at some numbers today, and I had.
You know what? I'm going to come back and go to Don first, and I'll let you answer that when we come back.
And Louis, we're going to answer a couple of your questions. First off, Fraser Nicola, Tony Locke with 3,700 votes, just over 50% of the vote. Francine Joe with the BC NDP with 2,866. That is 14 of 32 responding. But the other one that we are going to take a look at is the riding for Bruce Banman. He has been elected as a Conservative, 12,189 votes, 62% of the vote. Sarah Cooner with the BC NDP with 6,850, 34% of the vote. But again, as we're watching the province-wide numbers kind of bounce back and forth, nobody has a majority yet. We thought we did. The NDP leading or elected in 46, the Conservatives leading or elected in 45, the Greens with 2. Again, it's not over until it's over. Back to you guys.
Okay, so John, did you bring your sleeping bag and air mattress? Because all of a
All I'm saying right
it's
now,
not quite over yet.
remember we talked last week? I
Yeah.
said this could be a long night, and this one is not over yet.
Yeah, no.
2/3 of the polls across the province have
Yeah.
not been reported. So still a third of the polls
Yeah.
to come
Yeah.
in.
a long way to
is
go
it the
yet.
advanced one? Is that making the difference, right? As those start to trickle in.
You know, it doesn't necessarily at all. We go back
Yeah.
to 2020 when Jason ran in Chilliwack, Kent. The advance poll, when it was counted, didn't really differ substantially from the overall vote in terms of percentages.
Yeah.
I've seen other elections where that same kind of thing happened. It seems that the early voting people don't differ too much from the people who actually vote on election day.
Yeah, and that used to be a difference, though, right? Because
Yeah.
it was claimed. It was usually
But the voting patterns changed. I mean,
Sure,
this time around, there's 1 million people that voted in the advance poll.
Yeah.
That was unheard of only a couple of cycles ago.
And mail-in ballots as well during the pandemic certainly made a big difference.
Yes, it did.
Differently than they have in the past
Yeah.
or are now.
Talking about voting patterns and saying, that maybe we were reverting back to or going back to what was, traditionally the Chilliwack and the Fraser Valley known as that more conservative. That may be the case. We see with the results tonight, but interesting. I saw numbers on how voter intention broken down by age, and I had to read it twice because it was the younger demographic that was breaking for the Conservatives
Correct.
by a large portion.
Really?
So
Yes.
Louis, you were
Yes.
saying, are we getting
Yeah.
this? Are we getting influenced by this?
In
By
those
American
more
politics
historical,
or
progressive communities,
Mm-hmm.
that's happening.
these
for
are
sure.
some of the are some of the things that are changing, and I don't know. I don't know how loyal those voters might be for the Conservatives, younger voters, or if they're just looking to, they're fed up and looking for change. It's bad news.
But what are they
for
connecting
any
to? That's
party.
the thing, right?
Yeah.
What is the issue that's drawing? Because I always known, and I think we all have, is that younger people don't vote as much, or they're so busy in their own lives. The last thing they're going to do is go out and vote. And I've always said, if we could text vote, I think you'd be there for younger people.
Yeah,
But what's drawing them to the Conservative Party?
Well, these are young people.
Yep.
The Gen Z, I guess you call them, and they're in their 20s, and they're looking at, let's say, in the provincial scenario here, $8 billion deficit, and they're saying to themselves, "You're spending my money of
House
tomorrow."
prices, right?
House prices, and energy prices and things like that, and they're barely getting by. They're not able to buy a home.
Yeah.
In my generation, when we were their age, we were expecting to buy a home, and we did.
Yeah.
Now they can't. And so they're disenchanted, if you will.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the existing government and saying, well, you're not delivering, so we'll try something else.
Yeah. You got to have that hope for them, right? Like, you go to school, and usually school's lasting longer now, or they stay at home. It's like, what point other than first-time homeowners or something like that actually gives them hope? What government is the government that, I'm not too
Yeah,
sure.
or that has policies in place that allow them to develop a hope for the future.
Yeah.
Like a good education, a good job,
Opportunity.
Opportunity. That's right. I mean, it's people. I've always said this. People are extremely resilient as a population. You give them a chance, you watch them succeed. But when you put obstacles and barriers in the way, as a direct result of government action or as an inadvertent result of government action, well, then their chances disappear. And those young people, I think, today are onto that and seeing some of their options for the future being foreclosed.
Yeah.
And they're really unhappy about it, and rightly so.
Yeah, and we're not hitting them like in universities and stuff really anymore. Like I don't hear so much of the whatever party in the University of the Fraser Valley, or there's a pints and politics night, or I'm not hearing that. Are you hearing that out there?
I don't hear it as much, but I gotta say, like, I'm not young anymore, so
Yeah.
I'm not.
And
I'm
was
old.
it? Did you hear it when you
So,
were young?
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is a big question in
Yeah.
the Fraser Valley in terms of that age demographic aspect. But
Yeah, I think and I just saw two or three of the decision desks now are calling both of our local ridings, so they have both switched. I think it's fairly we can say with a high amount of confidence those have both switched. So congratulations to Heather and Alia. And looks like
And by
we'll,
the same
have
by the
two
same token, almost
MLAs.
congratulations or thanks to Kelli and for Dan for giving us 4 years each of their lives, and they I'm sure will remember it for a long time. All the effort that they put into to representing us. I know a little bit about what that's like, and so I think it's always appropriate to stop for a minute and say thanks for what they've done.
Absolutely, because the next day is the worst, isn't it, DJ? I mean, we've been a bridesmaid before, and it takes a little while to get over that and refocus. But as long as you put your best foot forward and you did a really good job, and I know both those candidates did a great job. I visited both of them in when I was doing work in Victoria, and I hope it's the same way with the two new candidates as well. We need those relationships with Indigenous people. We hope that Á'a can bring that to the table as well. To Chilliwack and bring everyone together now, because I think that's what needs to happen, especially because we're growing so fast, right?
Well, and I think again, watching the provincial results swing back and forth here, and at this point, it looks like the NDP with a very, very slim, one-seat majority, but not enough, not enough to call it, a majority. They would need the support of the Greens, but with the way it's looking on even the popular vote side, it looks like that conservative vote is much more efficient than people expected it to be. And so, there was a lot of questions about whether or not the Conservative had the mechanism as a party to get their vote done efficiently. And it looks like early on, I mean, if you're John Rustad tonight, maybe you're not leading provincially the number of seats, but you have to be pretty happy with
the result.
With the result so far. And if you're conversely, if you're David Eby, this is not a good showing. Going back to early on in the year, there was the NDP was projected to walk away with.
Let's put it this way. September, whatever it was, when Kevin Falcon announced he was blowing up his campaign, was the worst day this year for the NDP.
Yeah.
If Falcon had stayed in, they would have had a blowout victory.
Yeah.
So that's just the way it is. And so ever since then, and it was after that all of a sudden David Eby started altering some of his positions.
That's right.
They were making some big time adjustments on the carbon tax, for example.
Yeah.
So that date in this year's history.
That could be saving them tonight, right? It could be, that the slim margin was just enough people, to move over on the devil that
Yeah, but
Because
then
we're close.
when you make significant changes like that as the governing party,
Yeah.
about 2 months out from the election, it does call into question whether it's cynical behavior on the part of a government like that, right? It's
Yeah.
just trying to position itself. And
But to be fair, we didn't hear some of Chilliwack or conservative policy until just recently, right?
they apparently had a strategy of rolling it out
Yeah,
over
well,
time.
I have a concept, right? So, but voters
no,
should
that
see
that wasn't Rusted.
Well,
That was
voters
Trump.
should see
That was
everything
Trump.
before they vote, right? And I know that was one of the biggest complaints out
So
there.
you're bleeding over one campaign
No,
into the other.
no, I'm
Louis.
just saying that, you can't go after one without, the other. So
No.
all the platforms weren't quite developed
True,
yet.
but if
so-
you are the sitting government,
Yeah.
as opposed to a party that's still getting its act together,
Yeah.
you do expect kind of two different sets of behavior, and never mind the degree to which the NDP were funded,
Yeah.
as opposed to the meager amount of money that the Conservatives had with which to campaign. Over the 4-year cycle, the NDP had $8 million more that they got from the public purse than the BC Conservative Party.
Yeah.
That's a big amount
Oh,
of
it's
money.
a big amount. Yeah,
Sure
it's a
it
big
is.
difference. Yeah.
It's interesting though. You look at again results like this, and some of the results that are happening out of Surrey again. That we called that earlier. That orange wall. That orange wall has got some cracks in it. Even you're seeing like all the races. Within 1 or 2 percentage points, it looks like they're all going to be in that Surrey, Metro Vancouver area, and that's not good news for the NDP. Again, like not seeing too many surprises on the blue wall, but it's not the blue wave that people were saying either. It's funny because most of the people that were saying blue wave were Conservatives, trying to get that narrative going that it was the blue wave.
Here we
it's a
come.
blue wave
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing that blue wave either.
No,
across the
it stalled at a
province,
certain
but,
point.
Yeah.
It truly did.
Yeah.
So it might have crashed that wall, but not broken it.
Yeah.
I was just watching the scrolling going on here. 2 of the independents that were running, Shapitka and Oaks,
Yeah.
look like both of them are well behind the
Okay.
leader.
Yeah, so it's a pretty likely that we're not going to see any independents
It does not look
win
like it
across
at this
the
point,
province.
no.
Yeah.
It also looks like they've called Victoria Beacon Hill, and they've called it for the NDP. So
Yeah.
it looks
Oh.
like the Green Party leader, Sonia First to Know, will not be going back to the legislature. Again, Sonia, somebody who during just before the atmospheric river events and before the flooding and even after, she was somebody who phoned me directly and checked in. So I wish her well. There's Rob Botterill from
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
the Greens. That's
Right.
Saanich North. That's
Yeah.
Adam Olson's old seat. So
Yeah.
Right.
those were the two that I thought if they were going to be close, it was going to be those two. I think the other one is Jeremy Valerian in Sea to Sky.
Sky.
Yeah, Sonia was definitely an influencer, for sure. So
Yeah, and
that's a shame
it
she's
begs
not
the
gonna
question, so some choices to make for the Greens if they don't have their leader in the legislature.
win. Yeah, let's fly quickly to Dawn.
And updating, and again, the numbers are still bouncing around with the NDP leading or elected with 48 seats. The Conservatives leading or elected at 43. The Greens we're still looking at leading or elected in 2. A couple of things we have forgot to mention: Langley Abbotsford and John Aldag of the NDP not having a great night. This is 14 out of 17 polling places reporting. Harman Bangnu of the Conservative Party with almost 9,000 votes. Aldag with 5,400 votes. And again, that is 4 out of 17 polling places responding. Langley Walnut Grove, Megan Dykeman with the BC NDP, the almost former MLA, and did a lot of work with Kelli Paddon in the Chilliwack Kent riding, not having a great night, as Misty Van Papa of the Conservatives has 10,500 votes. Megan Dykeman with 9,600 votes. So that one is probably going to go down to the wire as we scroll back up and take a look at what we have in our backyard with Chilliwack North, and 15 out of 16 polling places reporting. Heather Maahs with a very comfortable lead as the Conservatives over Dan Coulter. Heather Maahs with 11,300 votes, Dan Coulter with 7,600 votes. Chilliwack Cultus-Lake, 14 out of 15 reporting, and the Conservatives, Ms. Warbus is now at 12,500. Kelli Paddon with 10,377. And as we mentioned in Abbotsford, Bruce Banman has been re-elected. Also, John Rustad re-elected, David Eby re-elected, Adrian Dix re-elected, and we're just keeping an eye on what's turned into be a very historic evening. We're going to take a break, and we will be back in just a few minutes. You're watching live election coverage on Chill TV.
Great. Well, welcome back. Things have changed a little bit. Numbers keep going up and down. 47, 44, and 2 for the Greens.
We're heading into a really interesting year, 2025. A number of the very large contracts for the unions come up, and we're heading into bargaining for public service, healthcare contracts.
Yep.
So who's going to be on the other side of this provincially is going to be determined tonight.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting standpoint from the labor workers' perspective of
Absolutely.
what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And it's close. It's still very close.
Still very close.
You're in potentially minority government
Territory right now.
So.
Yeah. I mean, at 40, if the NDP hold at 47 seats, that is the barest of bare majorities.
Yep.
And they need to nominate a speaker.
Yeah.
So that could potentially put them at 46, unless they're able to bribe somebody in the other parties to act as a speaker.
Right.
But hopefully we don't see that sordid business again that we saw with Darryl Plecas.
So the more things change, the more they stay the same. We're back in 2017 territory here, again with minority government, confidence and supply agreements on the table. So this is exciting stuff. If you're watching again, like BC never fails to be exciting when it comes to elections.
You know what? Even if you're decided BC Conservative, and you're looking at the results tonight, you say, "Oh man, we didn't make it." But I tell you what, the NDP is going to govern carefully. With 47 seats only. That's a whole lot different than governing with 57 seats, which they had.
Yeah. So where are we going to see sort of the similarities between them both. Like DJ, you talked about, that minority thing, and we talk about good things do come out of that sometimes when you have everybody having to get along and cooperate as far as policy or putting something in place. What might be some of those areas that, both parties can agree on?
Well, I think that's really important because what is that common ground?
Yeah.
And how do you represent the interests of British Columbians when the interests are so, the two parties that aren't close, they're very far apart, but the numbers are quite close. How do you represent those interests? And we achieved some really great things in 2017 in terms of that representation and representing the interests of those in the community, but some areas around common ground that are, again, like if we can start to carve through the noise around the polarization and some of this anger and some of the finger pointing and name calling, and start to address the actual issues and come up with solutions that are going to work for everyone and address the underlying reasoning that these things are happening without the games or the finger pointing
The
or whatnot.
hyper-partisanship and
So
absolutely.
that could actually be a really good thing. Right?
Well-
If we're going to address housing, we're going to address affordability, let's address climate change, let's
but-
do this in a way.
But, the NDP has been in power for 7 years. You can't disregard that 7 years. So when we have serious problems today, where was that government over the last 7 years? I mean, those issues have only become more acute. So, they're going to have to do some soul searching tonight. They're obviously looking at an unhappy electorate as an independent government. These results only tell me that the electorate was unhappy and gave you another chance, but barely.
Yeah.
So they got some recalibrating to do tonight, and whether they will have to do that in conjunction with the Greens possibly, I don't know. These results tell me the NDP so far have 47 seats. If they get a speaker from amongst their ranks, that takes them down to 46. So
Yeah.
there's going to be some really interesting dynamics there. But some of these seats I think will still switch because some of the results are very, very close.
Jason.
I was looking again when you were talking about trying to find those commonalities, and so if you look just on paper at the platforms, I think it's actually fairly positive for local government folks. Like if you're looking at both parties made big pledges around infrastructure and support for local government. I think maybe this is a like you said, a pretty big wake up call with the NDP around some of the maybe not so much the policies, but the way that they enact them, how local governments felt around Bill 44 and some of the things that were going on. So I hope we don't see a repeat of some of that. I know that was something that locally there's quite a bit of consternation around. But I think, big things, the crime and public safety, what does this mean around areas where there was, where prolific offenders, say there was lots of talk around that. Both parties seem to kind of coalesce back around the challenges with just blanket decriminalization. So I don't know. I think there's going to be some very interesting conversations. It's just got slimmer. So
Well,
Yeah.
I was just about to say we might be talking about the Conservatives having to find a speaker.
Well, this is it, right? So who's
Don't
the
know
winner
yet.
here? Like, with it being so close, who actually does,
Well,
do better? Like, I'm not saying
if-
party-wise,
if-
but I'm saying, is it industry? Is it agriculture? Is it unions?
Well, hopefully all of the above. Because after tonight, whoever's the government governs the entire province and represents all of the people of the province.
Yeah.
Right? So winners and losers. I always had a bit of an aversion to thinking like that because you're not there to represent one over the other. You're there to fairly govern everyone in a way that's acceptable to everyone. And not often are you going to actually achieve that, but that's what you have to strive for.
Excellent. We're going to step over to Don.
And again, the numbers flip-flopping with the NDP leading or elected in 46, the Conservatives leading and elected at 45, and the Greens with 2. Heather Maahs has been elected as the new MLA for the riding Chilliwack North with 11,350 votes. Dan Coulter with 7,700. So Heather Maahs is actually in a similar position as Dan Coulter was 4 years ago. He will have to step away from the school board. Heather Maahs will now have to step away from the school board to take up her new duties. It is still very close with Chilliwack Cultus-Lake, líya Warbus with 12,700 votes, Kelli Paddon with 10,400, and scrolling up to Abbotsford, as Bruce Banman has already won and been declared a winner there. Abbotsford Mission, Rianne Gasper of the Conservatives with just under 13,000 votes, Pam Alexis of the NDP with 10,300. Abbotsford South, Bruce Banman has won. Abbotsford West, Corky Neufeld with a comfortable lead. He was on the Abbotsford School Board. He's with the Conservatives, 10,695 votes. Graham Hutchison from the BC NDP at 6,600. So again, the NDP with 46 leading or elected, the Conservatives with 45, the Greens with 2, and Bowen Ma has been elected. We're just watching that. And again, the major leaders, David Eby as well as John Rustad, comfortably won their seats. Back to the panel.
Yeah, we're still looking at the numbers flip-flop a little bit, and we're just on the side having a conversation about how well the Conservatives did, and what does this lead to for their future, even if they don't get in. John, this has to be good for the Conservatives.
Well, this is a massive result for them, regardless of whether they form government or not. They were a party of 2 when the legislature dissolved. Then there were others that came on board. I think another 2 or 3. And then what was September the 13th happened, and the BC United disappeared. So a lot of things happened there, and they were campaigning and putting together a campaign on the fly. So this is still a good result for them, and they can take a lot of encouragement from that. Going forward, if they end up in opposition, that'll be a chance for them to consolidate, identify within their caucus the strong leaders in that caucus. There will be some, obviously, that emerge as being particularly good. Conversely, for the NDP, there's a lot of soul searching that's going to have to go on over the next couple of days.
Flip there, John. Look at that.
And now we're looking at 46 Conservative, 45 NDP. So you know what? I'm not sure yet what's going to look like tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And it might be, what do the Greens do? Do they, huddle up with the NDP? I think they kind of, some ways, feel betrayed last time.
Yeah.
When John Horgan didn't need them anymore, he called a snap election, said, see you later.
Yeah.
So, I would not rule out John Rustad having a serious chat with the Greens if that's necessary.
Yeah.
Stranger things have happened in politics, believe me.
Yeah, so we could see those, we talked about the talent amongst some of those Conservative candidates, and maybe líya playing, a role in, possibly a government, right? What do we, it's probably, it's a good time for them to get their feet under them and figure out who's who in the zoo.
Yeah, but the other thing you got to keep in mind too, in the Conservative caucus, there are a good number of them that have previous legislative experience.
Yeah.
They came from BC United, and then of course John Rustad and Bruce Banman and Lauren Dirksen from the Caribou, Teresa Watt. There's several others like that have been good performers. I was looking at the results for each of those people, and they're all scoring 60 and 70% in their home ridings. So they're in a good, strong position politically. They have a lot of experience, and should be able to, I think, translate that into a good, solid 4 years coming up. Whether that's in opposition or in government.
Yeah.
Right now, sitting here, we don't know that yet.
We don't know that. And what happens to the NDP, say, if there is an NDP loss? Do you think, we're looking at a new leader, or is it...
Oh, yeah.
You think that's going to be the case?
Well, I was hearing a fair bit of, tension within the party about the leadership style of David Eby, and a lot of, harkening back to the days of John Horgan, who was very popular within his own caucus and within his party. His leadership style was remarkably different, I think, from David Eby's.
Yeah.
So you get that. Everybody is different, but I think David Eby grated on a lot of people, and it was a very dictatorial, authoritarian approach that he employed. John Horgan was far more consensual. So they may be the party that are looking for a new leader after today
interesting.
to take them forward.
Yeah, and again, we're back to, well, maybe David Eby will hang out a little bit. They're ahead by one seat now. So.
Yeah, I think there's, no matter what happens tonight, there's going to be a lot of soul searching for the NDP right now. There's going to be a lot of going back over, talking about what didn't go well in terms of this, and you can't just say it was because BC United folded their tent and joined the Conservatives. You have to be introspective. You have to look exactly at why didn't it resonate. Why didn't the campaign we put forward, bring, give people hope and get them inspired and brought them out to the ballot box. Like I don't know.
I actually disagree with kind of that comparison around leadership between John Horgan and David Eby. I actually. Personally, where I stand, I think David Eby has a lot to offer as a leader and resonate a lot more with me and my values in terms of where that lines up. But I don't disagree with that. Where did we fall short and where do we need to go and course correct? And I also think like it is okay to, as a leader, be like, you know what, like, there was a mistake in this direction and that course correction needs to occur. I think that's something that we don't actually see from a lot of leaders, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's different than kind of flip-flopping on positions. Yes, I totally agree. But there's a lot of work to be done within the party, within the platforms, within policies and where we're going, especially on the climate piece of this, in my opinion. But for a lot of people within the party, there's differing opinions, and maybe that's a generational thing. But I think there's a lot of faith in David Eby, and yes, it might be a different leadership style, and there's always room for growth, right?
Yeah, John.
You know what? This is a replay of 7 years ago.
Oh, is it exactly, eh?
If the two Greens go with the Conservatives, they're government.
Yeah.
And David Eby could be in the same place Christy Clark was 7 years ago.
Yeah. So we could see, some reservations going out for some nice dinners somewhere.
So where do you think the...
The rugby game.
Oh dear. Where do you think that common ground would lie then between Conservative and Greens in terms of what they would find agreement on to like?
In talking to Greens over
government?
the years, a lot of them would tell me, look, I'm actually a very conservative person, but I care about the environment. To be a supporter of the Green Party doesn't necessarily often means you're left of center, but not always.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Now apparently Sonia Furstenau was not elected tonight, but I don't know these other two. Jason, you might know one or two of them.
Yeah, I don't know them well. I know Jeremy a little bit. I would struggle to see where, again, I don't speak with him. He came out very, very strongly against wood fiber LNG up in Squamish.
Right.
I don't know that that's going to resonate with the Conservatives and some of their plans. Again, on this one, it's going to be the morning before this one gets called. We're very late in the night. I think looking at those areas of common ground, it's going to be infrastructure for communities. It's going to be tackling this public safety, this persistent public safety concerns. I would encourage any of these newly elected MLAs, the first couple phone calls they make tomorrow should be to their local mayor and councillors and talk to them and introduce themselves if they haven't already. Some of them haven't, so I hope they do that. And I think. I really think that all parties need to take a breath and look at what British Columbians are telling them tonight. Is they're not giving anybody a
free
huge,
ride,
clear mandate
no.
here.
No.
They're saying work together. That's the message. Is work together. They're tired of the squabbling and the election rhetoric aside now, people are going to want to see a commitment to
Looking
work
for
together.
leadership that
They're
works.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and I have met David Eby on several occasions, and he's pretty good. Like, he's been pretty good.
I met him both, you know,
So
I
nice.
had a lot of interaction with him, both when he was a minister and then back up when he was a premier. The one thing I'll say is he took big swings. He took big, like, he wasn't afraid to take big swings on persistent, persistent challenges. He took kind of big swings at them. And that, when you get it right, you can really reap the benefit from that. But when you maybe doesn't land as well, you're going to get some of the challenges that come along with that. And you
I'd
might
be
see some of that
interested
tonight.
to see some of the percentages. Like, do we have any of those at all
In terms of
available? Like,
voter turnout?
yeah, voter turnout completely. Do
Oh,
we have
I
that
don't
somewhere
know that.
around? Yeah, because that'd be kind of interesting just to see how, you know, maybe this storm affected parts of Vancouver. If people do save their vote for the day of, because it didn't look real nice in North Vancouver.
But it doesn't change the result.
Doesn't change the result,
No.
but
It
you know,
is. It is what it is.
we
at this
had the
point.
pandemic. I mean, there's all, you know, when you have something like
There's
that.
always something.
Sure, yeah.
know.
Should we go to Dawn? Maybe Dawn's got a little bit of that right now.
Louis, we've got some numbers. Yes, Sonia First now has lost her seat at Victoria Beacon Hill. Right now, Elections BC is saying preliminary voter turnout 52.44%. 52.44. Now, the total amount of votes is that so far, registered voters is 3.5 million, total voter valid votes 1.8 million, and right now almost 89% of ballot boxes reporting. Looking at Abbotsford Mission, by the way, it is still really close, although pretty much everybody has reported. Rianne Gasper of the Conservatives leading Pam Alexis of the NDP in Abbotsford Mission, 13,111 to 10,454. Again, in Chilliwack North, Heather Maahs has been elected over Dan Coulter, and we're just going for an update with 14 out of 15 polling stations now reporting. Líya Warbus with the Conservatives at 12,988 votes, 55%. To Kelli Paddon's 10,625. But again, it's like 4 years ago when Dan Coulter won as an MLA, then he had to step back from the Chilliwack School Board. Now it's Heather Maahs' turn. Back to you guys.
Yeah, we're just looking at some of the voter turnout. Jason?
Yeah, well, I know that the advanced polls set records, and from what we just heard, it looks like we're at about 1.8 million. There's about 1.9 million votes cast total in the province last election. Of course, with the population change, it's gone up. So, but I think if we hit that 2 million vote mark, that would be historic in the province of British Columbia. I hope we do. You know, even at 52%, it sounds impressive, but that's less than half of eligible, or just a little over half of eligible voters casting their votes. So that's always a little bit
Not good enough.
depressing. Yeah.
Well,
It's
and
just not
speaking
good
of the mandate that you're giving or electing a government in an election, voter turnout speaks to that mandate. If 48% of your eligible voters don't vote at all, that in itself is a mandate, speaking to engagement and interest and what's resonating and what's not, and trust in the system, and is there opportunity to strengthen our democracy and the systems and the representation and what that looks like.
Sure, yeah. So,
Well, it's 46-45, but
I
who's
know.
ahead? Who knows?
I know. So, we'll probably wind things up at 9:30 pretty well. And so I want to go around the table, though, and last thoughts. It's been pretty amazing to watch. And, we have a new day tomorrow. What's that going to look like, John? What do you think?
Well, really hard to say. I
Yeah.
mean, I said 46-45 are the numbers right now, and they've been flip-flopping back and forth. If they stay where they are right now, then John Rustad will be going to see the Lieutenant Governor and saying, I can form a government, and, but There will also be, before that happens, possibly discussions with the Green Party. Who are they going to support?
Yeah.
Or are they going to say, we're not supporting anybody, you guys figure it out, and we'll, have our support in place on an issue-by-issue basis?
Yeah.
Then, John Rustad would probably be the guy to form government.
Yeah.
And you'd actually, in that case, you'd have a tie because they
You
have to elect a speaker, so 45-45. So the Greens would hold the balance of power, with or without a supply and confidence agreement formally at all. And that's not required. I mean, we've got used to that a little bit because federally there was an agreement like that in place with Jagmeet Singh. But that's not the usual thing.
Yeah.
Usually you just go to Parliament, you go to the legislature with whatever number of seats you got, and the largest party forms government, and you try to keep that minority government going as long as you can.
Yeah, so
That's the
where
usual
do we
scenario.
stand as far as confidence? Like, people look at BC now and go, oh my goodness, right? You're in a
Well,
statistical tie.
this result is not necessarily a good thing in
Yeah.
terms of economic confidence.
Exactly, that's what
for
I'm
sure.
talking about.
I mean, this probably means there'll be another election sooner rather than later.
Oh my goodness. We could be back here before we know it.
Oh, well, I've had so much fun tonight, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, DJ.
Well, speaking of tomorrow, October 20th is campaign sign cleanup day, usually, in the middle of an atmospheric river. And I think that's worth noting. Everyone who is putting their names forward to be a candidate, who is engaging in a campaign, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're working on a campaign, you are doing a significant service to your community and to politics and to democracy. And I want to thank you. I want to take a moment
Absolutely.
to talk about the campaigns that have been run and also our outgoing MLAs, Dan Coulter and Kelli Paddon. Thank you from the bottom of my heart of representing our communities in such an excellent fashion. Congratulations to Heather and Líya on your election. We've got a lot of work to do in our communities. Starts with cleaning up the signs tomorrow, and I think the wind is blowing too, so it's a election sign soup, I like to call it. It usually happens at least once every time. But thank you to everyone who engaged in those campaigns, put their name forward as a candidate, and also took the time to vote. That's the most important thing. And if you're not voting, I think engaging in those discussions as to what are those barriers that exist and why are you not voting, and what needs to change for that to occur is only going to strengthen our communities here locally. So that's what I'm looking forward to for tomorrow, and personally preparing for public service bargaining in 2025 with whatever government is in power tomorrow or after is certainly incredibly important for me personally, but as well as the 34,000 public servants in BC, and healthcare as well. Lots of work to do. So and thank you, Chill TV, for creating this space for us to chat and offer some commentary on our local results as we're coming in and have these important discussions. It's been great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah,
closing
no,
words.
thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for letting me crash the party.
Yeah, that's okay. No, this has been fun.
Again, like I look at this and I'm just running through the numbers again. 25 of these races are within 5%. Half of those 25 seats right now are within 2%.
Wow.
And so how that transpires into numbers, think about it. Most of those less than 100 votes. So if you did vote, thank you. If you didn't, you know,
Shame
people
on
say,
you.
well, will my vote count?
Right.
Those almost a quarter of those prospective MLAs would say otherwise. So you need to get out. Again, 52%, not good enough. We need to get out and as a society talk more about how we're going to fix this and get less apathy and more people out. One of the ways in doing that, again, having these kind of discussions, inviting us on. Again, congrats to our two new MLAs here in Chilliwack. I look forward to speaking with you and enlightening you on some of the challenges that we have at the city of Chilliwack and the regional district. Thank you to both Dan and Kelli. I spent an awful lot of time working with both of you, and you should both be very proud of the service that you gave and the things that you helped bring to Chilliwack. I very much again. It is not over. It's going to be still a long night yet. You saw the seats flip back to 46 NDP, 45. So, yeah, we may be off the air, but we'll probably be watching this for
yeah, we got to get the popcorn going now. Yeah, and get the PJs on and cozy up, with your...
Well, you do what you do, but
I thought you were going to hang out here for a while with us. Yeah, don't leave us now. It's raining out there. So thanks very much, everyone. My name's Louis De Jaeger, and John Les, DJ Pohl, Jason Lum. We have had a really cool time here. It's been fun sort of examining and picking things apart, but in the end, it's all about the people, right? And all of us, coming together and doing our part. And definitely, I love that little bit about the volunteers because, man, you cannot do anything without them. So I'm just going to pass it to Dawn before I come back and just wish you all well. So Dawn.
So the final numbers as we are about to leave air. Abbotsford Mission, Rianne Gasper of the Conservatives leading Pam Alexis, 13,000 votes to 10,000. Abbotsford South, Bruce Banman has been elected. Abbotsford West, Corky Neufeld has been elected. For Chilliwack North, as you heard, Heather Maahs is the new MLA for Chilliwack Cultus-Lake. 14 out of 15 reporting now. Líya Warbus with 13,094 votes. Kelli Paddon with 10,692. Also keeping an eye on another riding that we should really take a look at. Tony Luck has pretty much wrapped up Fraser Nicola with the Conservatives, 8,300 votes. Francine Joe with the NDP at 5,500 votes. And there was also the one Langley riding that borders on Abbotsford. And Harman Bangu with the Conservatives had a very easy night, 13,600 votes over John Aldag of the NDP, 8,200 votes. And Langley Walnut Grove, this one is really, really close. Megan Dykeman, the current MLA, NDP MLA, has done a number of projects with Kelli Paddon. She has 10,000 votes, but she is still about 1,000 votes shy of Misty Van Papa of the Conservatives at 11,199. Again, NDP leading or elected in 46. The Conservatives leading or elected in 45. David Eby and John Rustad have both been re-elected. Sonia Furstenau has lost her seat in Victoria Beacon Hill. Louis?
Wow, what an evening. Congratulations to the newly elected candidates, Heather Maahs for Chilliwack North and Líya for Chilliwack Cultus-Lake. I'd like to thank our title sponsor, Andmar Development, without whose sponsor and support for this program would not be possible. And VBN Broadcasting for their live stream of Chill TV's production, and the Vineyard Media Center from where Chill TV Studios broadcasts from in beautiful downtown Chilliwack. Thank you to our election panel, John, DJ, Dawn, and our guest, Jason Lum. And thanks most of all to all of you for exercising your democratic right by voting in today's election and also for tuning into our program. And until next time, I'm Louis De Jaeger. See you soon. Chimikwich.
Each vote is a promise, a step toward a new light. With pen on paper, our voices ignite. Stand up, get your voice on the line. With history in hand, it's voting time. Feel the rhythm of change.